Hello, UCAR. Peter Christensen here, coming to you from the CEO's desk. Wanted to talk quickly about the seller's property condition disclosure and the deadline associated with it. So it has its own deadline, seller's disclosure deadline. And it says in Section 7 of the REPC that seller will provide written seller's property condition disclosures by the seller's disclosure deadline. Does it matter? What if the seller's late on this? Does it matter? My answer is yes, maybe. So usually it's not as big of an issue because a buyer has the due diligence deadline and contingency and can cancel. So if they don't get them on time, they can cancel, right? And they already had the right to cancel, so it doesn't necessarily disadvantage the seller, although let me tell you why it could. But now it's a bigger issue because we have buyers waiving contingencies. So let's say a buyer waived their due diligence condition, waived the finance and appraisal condition, and then seller gets those property condition disclosure, gets that property condition disclosure report to the buyer after the deadline. What does that mean in the big picture? Well, have you given the buyer an out now? Could the buyer then cancel based off of the lack of that being in there? I'd say probably the buyer can. Now, some people might argue, well, that's not material, but that certainly could be deemed as material. And then in the REPC, we have Section 21, which is a time is of the essence clause, which gives every date a little more punch. Basically says every deadline in this contract is serious and must be met by 5 o'clock. Probably that's going to be used to say, yeah, this is material. And so seller, yeah, maybe the buyer could just back out for due diligence. But if it's a seller breach, then buyer could ask for the seller to match the earnest money as a penalty. Point is, how this would all end up in court and what the result would be, I don't know. I don't know, because certainly an attorney for the seller would argue this is non-material. Maybe it was given 2 days later and it's cured, so it's not a problem now. But the attorney for the buyer's agent or buyer is going to say time is of the essence clause. It's a material breach because of that. And we are owed the earnest money and the earnest money matched. Point is, you don't want your seller to end up in court over this. So let them actually pay attention to that deadline. If it's 2 days after you go under contract, 3 days after you go under contract, that might not be enough time for that seller to get that done. And as with any document or deadline in the REPC, your job is to bring clarity to the contract. And what you're doing by missing deadlines or not having your client make these deadlines is you're bringing some ambiguity. Now there's the question, can the buyer get out of the contract and have their earnest money matched? If they waived contingencies, did you just give them an out now by not observing that deadline? How long of time has passed, and can they still take advantage of that even though they've done other things in the contract since that deadline was breached and the seller has still produced the documents after? And is it cured? Is it not? Let's not put our clients in these positions. How a court rules, you don't want to find out. You don't want to be the test case to find out if a court views that as material or not. So have your seller pay attention to that deadline, meet that deadline, just like you would a buyer with every other deadline, so that there's never the question. In these crazy market conditions, we're just seeing more and more parties trying to find ways to get out of contracts. So this is where you really shine. You help them understand the deadlines. You keep them in line. And it's never a question if you meet the deadline. So remember, this is not specific legal advice. This is legal information only. If you need specific legal advice, please contact your attorney. Thanks for tuning in. Leave us comments if you want us to cover something, and check out our other videos if you find these helpful. Thanks.